this one is actually Paris. This is obviously before the other stuff. The more recent stuff was in Paris say, a year ago. And so you're getting more of this. Goodness knows what it's like now. I like this one. You don't need to speak Tamil to get this message, right? The guy's going to shoot you. It's a protected place. And so the prospects are centre for the rich, increasingly. Now some cities, Upper East Side of Manhattan was always the rich. London, Kensington was always kind of rich. But it's extending out. The poor are being shunted off to the suburbs. You're getting greener cities, so it's not like everything's going to hell in a handbasket. You're getting more policing of space, more gated communities, and that sort of debate about the right to the city is actually one of the more, but actually it's not so much about poverty, it's about the right to the city, I think. And I'm just going to end with some random kind of things, global phenomenon, in the sense of this is showing you my holiday snaps of my sabbatical. So here's Mumbai. You would have thought, they're getting, was a gated community, high-rise in Mumbai in India. This is Singapore, very cool building, similar thing. This is Bangkok. You can see it, and actually it's interesting to follow the money for these things. One of the things is, actually all of these developments are big, mega projects, and they require big chunks of money. And big chunks of money are looking for investment for big chunks of money. So it's obviously connected to globalization of finance, I think. This is Vancouver, which is now called Hongcouver. Did you know that? You probably knew that, anyway. So it's called Hongcouver because there's not so many Chinese there. Initially from Hong Kong in the wake of before the 1997, and then more recently mainland China. There's always, every week, there's always some Chinese official found carrying bags of money, trying to buy a house. So it's obviously kind of global finance. And this is Ho Chi Minh City. And that's a big mega investment. In a city that, 20 years ago, it's only the Doi Moi reforms were, when were they? It was not all that long ago, really, isn't it?
30 years ago.
Yeah, okay, but it takes a while, right? This is Dubai. And I end with this one, because this is the Burj Khalifa. And I think what I want to end was the notion of okay, all this investment flooding in for this urban resurgence. It also comes at the price of fluctuating land markets. And the Burj Khalifa is a good example, tallest building in the world. Was actually they ran out of finance for it. And so the joke is it's in Dubai, but the Dubai didn't have enough money to finish it off, so they have to go to Abu Dhabi. And so the biggest tower in Dubai is named after the leader of Abu Dhabi. Because Abu Dhabi has 20 times more oil than Dubai, so they have more money. So the guy said, well, I'll give you the money, but you have to change the name. So it'll be like the Hong Kong, building in Hong Kong, and suddenly it's changed the Singapore building in Hong Kong. So that's it. So I think that shows you the sense in which a lot of urban resurgence, but the more it's capitalised, the more it attracts more investment, the more you're in a boom and bust now. So I think I've spoken for enough. I think, right?
That's great. No, we could go on, for longer, but we have to have time for questions.
Sure.
And, it connects, what you've been talking about is connected quite a few things that we're working on here. We're colleagues doing work on gentrification in China, and we've got other work on cities in the super rich. So, I open it up to comments, questions. I just want to I'm going to rush off to Kobe in about 20 minutes. So I just wanted to say before anybody else said it, that, Japanese cities are going to fit into this picture because, in somewhere like Tokyo, prices are shooting up the centre, but the old condos on the suburbs are just declining in value. And it's partly to do with societal aging, but it's to do with, the friends are in the centre of Tokyo, and professional classes, and property values just going down, they're plummeting on the edges of Tokyo.
So that's their equivalent of America's inner ring suburb.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, there's other things as well, but I'll open it up for other people to make some comments. Or I'll say something else. You're poised.
Well, there's hundreds of things. I mean, I like the presentation. I mean, I was born in Holland, so I moved to Amsterdam mid-80s when this whole, so I'm part of this sort of new group of people getting into the city, not liking the suburbs where I grew up. So I totally recognize that, and I think the timings are a little bit different, but the whole phenomenon that you're describing is totally similar to the Netherlands, although I think the role of governance I'm missing a little bit, because in the Netherlands in the 80s still there was a very strict rent control, and the housing market has been neoliberalized totally, and I think that sped up all these changes a lot. So I think if that wouldn't have happened, there wouldn't have been so much displacement of people in inner cities, that sort of things. Yeah. But that sounds very similar. But I was just thinking what's maybe interesting to think about is that in a couple of the Asian cities that are prime global cities now, but have been developing recently, like if you think about Bangkok or Chinese cities, both phenomena, both the suburbanization and the resurgence of this inner city is taking place. So there's still a lot of people moving to these suburbs, and if you look at Bangkok, for instance, it's still the sort of I think it's a Chinese dream of having your own house on your own plot. It's a very strong sort of feeling, but at the same time, it's creatively enormously interesting. There's a whole fashion industry. And there's a lot of space in the inner cities also, but there's all these people moving into condos as well, which didn't exist like 15, 20 years ago. And then people, and this is not really international investment, it's much more national. It's still rich people, they're buying for their children, buying for themselves, to have a second home in the city. But then this whole development of these suburbs falling away is not really taking place yet, if we follow your story. So thinking about Asian cities like that, the idea of what's going to happen in these suburbs in 15, 20 years, think about Chinese cities and what's going to happen with the suburbs. I mean, everybody is all the time focusing on how bad it is with the inner city and what's changing there, but it might be much worse, the future, maybe for the suburbs, if you think in those terms.
I responded a couple of ways. I'm looking for the thing. Actually, I was in Bangkok and I did actually take photographs of, because I had that same sense of taking out a couple of transects, getting all of this rebuilding, plus they still had the big posters up for, the new suburban home and the car, and they even had things like Happy Unit, like the kind of conjured up names. What I didn't mention, and I'm glad you did, the thing about Amsterdam, for a while Amsterdam had much stronger rent control. You actually had, Amsterdam had a different feel to, say, London, because you actually had more modest income people living in central Amsterdam. Right? So that was one of the attractions for people, young people, to go to Amsterdam. The restaurants were still affordable, there was still a kind of big... And I think what that raises is the issue of governance, of how do you respond to this change in urban space. The last time we had a major bout of legislation, say in the US, was rent control in the US. And say it's a municipal level, so you had rent control in New York. Increasingly, you have issues of kind of creative planning. So one of the things that's brought about now is, so that area which you said wasn't authentic, that's the area where I live, and about 20% of the housing is allocated to what's called workforce housing. And that's police officers, school teachers. And so the other thing I've seen is New York under Blasio is trying to do things like, well, we're going to change, we will allow developers extra units, change the zoning, if some of it is social housing. And so I think that's that notion of, I just briefly alluded to the right to the city, which is the sense of, increasingly people are getting that sense of, and sometimes it's made, so in London it's made easier because it's all Russian oligarchs, right? But there's that sense of like we're being priced out, and often it's by foreigners, wherever you are in the world. So it has a slightly xenophobic feel, but I think that's a major debate. How do you respond to that? This market is putting poor people to the thing. Do you want that, or how do you go about residential mixing? In the Netherlands, there's a lot of good studies about what's the consequences of mixing. And what's his name?
Sacco and
Johan Kemp, I think so I've seen some of his work. And the US, they started to do some. And what's interesting, studies are quite interesting. So mixed communities or mixed income communities are good for young black women. They do better in schools and everything else, and young black men do worse. Which is interesting, because I think it becomes then about a macho quality that kind of gets them more into trouble, police or whatever. But I think that's going to one of the big debate, and it's really one that I didn't touch on, and really ever develop this further. You need to look at what's the public policy responses coming back from that, and how the precise mix. So I don't want to do it, it's really like build a big general theory, but I think there's this sense of like different things unfolding in different places in slightly different ways. And urban theory is often tough because, if you do get some urban theories, it's either so utterly banal that applies to everywhere that, okay, yeah, people like living in cities, wow, fabulous, it's urban theory number one, right? Not much you can do with that. And then if you become too specific, you lose. So I think urban theory is more like those mesoscale theories. And we need more of those, I think, that are aware of global phenomena, and I think I'm utterly convinced of that now, but kind of cultural norms, for especially for cohorts, are actually quite increasingly, you know that by rap music or clothes or fashion or whatever. So there's that, plus there's a globalization of finance, and plus there's a globalization of urban planning measures. They all go to conferences, there's a kind of network. So one of the global flows is a sort of urban management. You see that we're much more aware of that, I think, in global climate change issues and urban, minimizing the carbon footprint for cities. They're learning from each other much more. So there's this sense of a kind of sort of link kind of connection of cities and how they change in different. The only major work we've got is the GOP school, Peter Taylor and John Beaverstock, and that's Advanced Producer Services, and they would be the first to admit that this is the best data source we had at the time, but we could do with other stuff. And I think they're saying, well, we moved the dial a bit, other people to do stuff. But we could do a lot more with that. There's kind of global networks and how the things themselves change in certain places and transformed and then moved on. I just think it's a really interesting time for urban work and urban theorizing and that connection of good empirical work and good kind of theorizing work and how it builds up into a kind of hopefully some kind of coherent picture. I just think it's a really so I think I've got the notion of urban resurgence, but it doesn't quite fit into the Asian experience, I think, and I'm not familiar enough with that to feel comfortable so much about it. So I look forward to lots more work coming out from you guys.